rose to the pinnacle of power on March 1st, 2020, following a political coup which toppled the government of Pakatan Harapan on February 24th. From a reformist multicultural coalition government, power was transferred to a nationalist and conservative alliance made up of a loose coalition of Malay-based parties known as the Perikatan Nasional or National Alliance.
Nobody knows what their vision is, and you have a coalition of very strange bedfellows, I would say.
It is a fragile coalition that required a creative solution by the Prime Minister to maintain its stability.
But before he has the time to steady the ship and steer the nation forward, Mr. Muhyiddin Yassin has to confront the biggest health crisis the country has ever seen: COVID-19.
What if I don't survive, and what if my body's too weak to fight the virus?
The outbreak is now pushing Malaysia towards its worst recession since the 2008 global financial crisis.
It's very hard to say when this economic crisis will end.
Will Mr. Muhyiddin and his new government be able to overcome this unprecedented crisis? Will he survive the biggest test to his leadership? The rise of Muhyiddin Yassin to power on March 1st, 2020 marked a historic turning point in the nation's political history. It capped a week of unprecedented political turmoil and uncertainty following the sudden resignation of former Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir Mohamad and the collapse of the Pakatan Harapan government. But a huge challenge awaits him. Even before the dust had time to settle, he has to deal with the growing threat from the COVID-19 outbreak and its potential damage to the economy. From just 29 COVID-19 cases on March 1st, the number of infections surged to 190 in a single day, 3 weeks later on March 15. It then rose again the next day with 125 infections, bringing the total number of cases nationwide to 553. That was also the time when the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 outbreak a global pandemic. For at least 2 weeks, Malaysia operated without a health minister. The outgoing health minister was Dr. Zulkifli Ahmad from Pakatan Harapan government. He was then tasked with the responsibility of putting the outbreak under control.
In the early period, we were immediately getting down to do what we call as very rigorous social meaning contact tracing, and we were also doing the isolation, and we were doing treatment immediately. So those early days were, I must say, you don't see this cluster outbreak as of what you saw. After I left, there were 11 days of kind of a hiatus, quite a kind of a lull, no positive cases found. We were observing the acceleration phase of the epidemic.
It was in late February 2020, during the height of Malaysia's political crisis. Some 12,000 Islamic missionaries from nearly 30 countries gathered for a 4-day religious event at a mosque in the outskirts of Kuala Lumpur. Azrul Fazmi Abu, a long-time volunteer at the Sri Petaling Mosque, was among those who helped organize the event. He said that the mass gathering was the key event for the world's biggest Islamic missionary movement.
Jadi kita melibatkan seluruh orang Islam yang berada di Malaysia dan berada di luar negara. Dan negara-negara Islam, negara-negara umat Islam yang tinggal juga kita jemput mereka sebagai tetamu. Contoh negara jiran seperti Brunei, Singapura, Thailand dan yang lain-lain. Ada juga daripada Europe, daripada Asia, daripada jauh mereka datang untuk mengambil berkat ataupun meraihkan majlis tersebut.
It was also on the final day of the gathering that Mr. Muhyiddin Yassin clocked in his first day at work as Malaysia's 8th Prime Minister. No one knew then that the mosque at Sri Petaling was to become Southeast Asia's biggest source of infections, spreading the coronavirus to half a dozen countries. The mammoth event went almost completely unnoticed until neighbouring Brunei confirmed that its first COVID-19 patient was linked to the event in Sri Petaling. All of a sudden, infection cases in Brunei soared, from 0 to 50 in 1 week. Since then, more than 2,500 COVID-19 cases in Southeast Asia have been linked to the mass event, including nearly 2,000 cases in Malaysia alone. Health Ministry officials were racing against time to track down every single person who attended the gathering before it spread to the wider community. It was later discovered that 5 generations, or up to 40,000 people, had close contact with the participants.
Generally, the Tablighi movement is a century-old movement. It has members from all around the world, and they often meet occasionally in many countries. But what happened in this Malaysian meeting is a large-scale one, and during such gatherings, I think it's a normal gathering where members share some of their experiences during their missionary work, and a lot of the rituals forces them to stay close to one another during their prayers, during dining time together. So this actually allowed them to have close contact with one another, and this is one of the reasons why the COVID-19 was able to spread quickly during such gatherings.
I've always had this fear of managing outbreak. It was also the same case in Sungai Kim Kim in Pasir Gudang chemical outbreak, and as well in Kuala Lumpur there were deaths. So my greatest fear is deaths, mortality, because I'll be responsible, and every week I have to brief the cabinet, and it's always like the first on the agenda, and I've got to really, it's sticking my neck out to say that we are in control, and we say that we are in control, we truly are in control, and that we got to really know. And I'm very apprehensive of the kind of days where our facilities will be overwhelmed.
But the question is, why was the mass gathering even allowed to go ahead in the first place, especially at a time when the world was dealing with a major outbreak? According to Azrul, there was no attempt by the authorities to stop or cancel the gathering.
Kita mendapat permit kebenaran dari polis, bomber, pihak pejabat kesihatan, pejabat daerah. Oleh itu, kita tidak ada sebab untuk kita membatalkan program tersebut, kerana pada peringkat COVID-19 itu dia bukanlah waktu itu bukanlah satu peringkat yang begitu serius yang menyebabkan kita semua tahu perkara ini. Kalau kita buat perhimpunan ini akan mendatangkan kesan yang amat bahaya. Sebab itulah pada perhimpunan yang hari yang sama juga berlakunya perlawanan bola sepak di antara pasukan Johor dengan negeri Kedah, yang mana stadium hampir 20,000, dan pada hari yang sama juga ada perhimpunan-perhimpunan yang lain yang mana perkara ini tidak di-highlightkan.
Some critics believe that the political turmoil during that crucial week had taken the attention away from a real crisis at hand.
It was during that period where Tun Dr. Mahathir has resigned as Prime Minister, and later he became the interim Prime Minister, where he's actually a one person running the government. That could have distracted people generally from the whole crisis. I think we can't solely blame the government, because I think if you look at how this crisis affected many countries, I think this is something that is unprecedented. We have to also look at how society behaved very early on during this whole pandemic. People were not expecting what they have seen now, because they are quite unsure how to tackle COVID-19. And on the one hand, you have religious groups continuing with their rituals, thinking that this matter is not serious. Some groups were quite fatalist, saying that God will save them. So we have those kinds of orientations, those kind of thinking in society. And it was only later there was a realization that COVID-19 is very serious.
Well, as everybody knows, the whole coup or the Sheraton move happened during the, or at least the beginning of the peaking of the COVID-19 outbreak. So as soon as they were appointed to the cabinet, that was the first agenda, almost immediately, which was to deal with the outbreak. So yes, that was the first challenge, but not before they formed the cabinet. There was a lot of rumblings and dissatisfaction expressed after the cabinet was formed, but this was kind of overtaken by the crisis of the pandemic itself. So you know that there was a lot of rumblings underneath. Well, anything can happen. See, after this health crisis is over, if it is over at all, so you have a lot of suppressed political tensions at this moment on top of this big crisis.
And that gave Mr. Muhyiddin a little breathing space as he tried to stabilize his government and deal with the outbreak. Despite the political rumblings over the new cabinet composition, particularly from UMNO members, the pandemic has had the effect of pulling all the political forces together towards a single cause. Former Cabinet Minister Azalina Othman was among those who expressed displeasure over the cabinet lineup from the very start. She posted on her social media accounts that her party, UMNO, should have been given more senior posts, being the largest party in the coalition.
If you look at how the proportionate representation, or you say that, well, should UMNO get more, should the political Islamic party get more, or whichever party get more, definitely this is how the leadership of each party would have negotiated. So on one extent, you may say, well, how come we didn't get more since we are more? But on the other extent, you must also accept the fact that maybe there is real good justification or grounds for why which political party gets which ministry and why they are more or they are less in that particular ministry. I mean, that's how I look at it.
To form a cabinet, it is impossible to please everyone. And some would likely be upset, and it would be up to the party to manage the sentiments among the members. The reality and immediate concern for the new government now is to ensure that we can get past the COVID-19 pandemic. And at the same time, the new government is drafting the deliverables for the rakyat. But we would be focused on not promising what we cannot deliver. We would not promise the moon and the sky. It is true that we are not bound to any manifesto, but this does not mean we cannot deliver a new deal to the people.
As the authorities work tirelessly to contain the spread of the coronavirus, new infections have emerged from time to time. It's a clear indication that the fight against the deadly virus is far from over. What has the government done so far to break the chain of infections? Will Mr. Muhyiddin and his government win the fight against the deadly pandemic?
I always thought of it like, what if I don't survive? And what if my body's too weak to fight the virus?
January 25th, 2020, Malaysia reported its first 3 confirmed cases of COVID-19. A 65-year-old woman from Wuhan, China, and her 2 grandchildren, aged 2 and 11. They are part of the same family of 8 Chinese nationals who were in close contact with the first person who was tested positive for the coronavirus in Singapore. But since then, the number of infected cases has increased exponentially. On March 16, just 2 weeks after he was sworn into office, Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin announced a nationwide lockdown in a desperate bid to contain the spread of the virus. It was to take effect from March 18 to 31st. All business premises were ordered to be shut down, except for outlets selling daily essentials. Malaysians were also banned from travelling abroad. No tourists or foreigners could enter the country as well. Schools, non-essential businesses and houses of worship were also ordered to close. The announcement was made after the total number of positive cases in Malaysia shot up to 553, the highest in Southeast Asia then. A majority of the new cases were linked to a cluster at the Sri Petaling Mosque. When the announcement was made about the impending lockdown, 22-year-old student from the University of Manchester, Putri Nur Shara Tajo Azlan, was still keeping to her normal routine. It was also business as usual in the UK. People went about their daily business without any restrictions, even though the disease had spread like wildfire in China.
The universities were still having lectures and tutorials. And suddenly when Malaysia was having an outbreak, everyone started to panic and everyone started to question, like, should we come back or should we just stay? Will the university close down and stuff like that, you know, the questions. And then when the government announced the lockdown, the RMO, of course, us students will be like, should we come back? Because, of course, we want to be with our families. And if there was a total lockdown, we can't go out, we can't come in. So everyone started to look for flight tickets.
Shara rushed to book her flight ticket and was on her way home within days. When she arrived on March 23rd, she felt perfectly normal and passed through airport screening without any problem. She then took the airport limousine arranged for her family and went straight to her room, isolating herself from her 3 brothers, parents, and a helper.
On Tuesday, I booked a home sampling test, and it was scheduled on Monday, the 30th. But on Wednesday, I started to show a slight sore throat, but that was it. I was quite in denial at first because I feel like, oh, maybe it's just the change of weather or because I'm jet lagged and everything. But on that day, I got a text from Malaysian students in Manchester saying that one of the passengers were tested positive on Wednesday. So my family got really panicked and they were really worried. So I straight away called my doctor and said I wanted to take the test on Thursday.
Her eldest brother, Fariz, said his family took his sister's health condition very seriously. They had gone to great lengths to ensure they did not have any close contact with her, no matter how much they missed her.
Before she came home, we already told her all the details, all the procedures, what our government told us, all the procedures, such as soon as she arrived in Malaysia, she needs to be quarantined for 14 days. And we made it clear everything that she couldn't have any close contact with us or anyone. So we took every early precautions so that, because we do not want to be infected as well. My mom had a heart surgery a few years ago. So we were worried about my parents' health because they have medical records history. And my dad, he has diabetes.
On Thursday morning, Shara went to the clinic to get tested for COVID-19. 4 days later, the result came out. She had tested positive for the coronavirus.
I started packing because when they called, they said around 4 p.m. the ambulance will come and pick me up. My father prepared lots of vitamins, honey, all snacks and all food stuff, right? And then around 4 p.m. the ambulance came and everyone was still in their room. I just got into the ambulance and my other family members were on the balcony breathing. I was pretty sad and nervous at that time, but because my mom looked so sad, so I really can't be sad also because I have to be strong for them. So I almost cried at that time, but I feel like it's okay. I'm gonna be okay.
In all, Shara spent 6 days at a hospital in Selangor under constant observation by medical workers, sharing a ward with 3 other women who were also tested positive but only developed mild symptoms.
We still don't know because, we don't know when we're gonna die, right? So I always thought of it like, what if I don't survive, and what if my body's too weak to fight the virus? But everyone around me was pretty positive about it, and they keep telling me that I'm gonna be okay, and I'm young, and my health is okay. So probably support from people is very important.
She survived the ordeal. On April 6, she tested negative for COVID-19 and was allowed to go home.
I took the test at 2 a.m. that morning, on the 6th of April, 3 a.m. Yeah, the doctor came and took the test, and my results came out around 4 p.m. The doctor called me and said, okay, we just got your results and it comes out negative, so you can go home. I was very happy. I was really happy. I straight away called my mom. I said, I can go home and just have to prepare everything.
Although Shara has now fully recovered from the disease, the battle against the pandemic in the country is far from over. Malaysia today has almost 5,900 people who have been infected by the deadly virus. 100 of them have died. Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin initially announced a partial lockdown or a movement control order from March 18 to 31st. It is now into the 3rd phase, which will end on May 12th, well into the fasting month of Ramadan.
Saya dapati bahawa usaha-usaha untuk membendung wabak COVID-19 masih perlu diteruskan. Walaupun angka-angka menunjukkan perkembangan yang positif, langkah-langkah yang kita ambil hendaklah diteruskan sampai ke satu masa di mana kita yakin wabak COVID-19 dapat dibendung sepenuhnya. Sehubungan itu, saya ingin mengumumkan bahawa Perintah Kawalan Pergerakan PKP yang dijangka berakhir pada 28 April 2020 akan dilanjutkan untuk tempoh 2 minggu lagi, iaitu sehingga 12 Mei 2020.
Transport Minister Wee Ka Siong says the lockdown was necessary to flatten the curve of the infection.
We specifically call it a movement control order, MCO, because under the proper conditions, most people can still move about to buy necessities, seek medical attention within 10 kilometers of their homes. And the sole purpose of limited movement is so that each new case infects one less person. And it is to flatten the pandemic curve of the infection rate. And the sooner we can do that, the sooner we can get our economy moving again and Malaysians back to their normal lives.
The first announcement on the impending lockdown on March 16 left many Malaysians in Singapore in limbo. They had less than 2 days to decide what to do next, with no place to stay, no cash at hand, and possibly no prospect on hanging on to their jobs. Among them were 300,000 Malaysians who travel across the causeway from Johor to Singapore daily to earn a living. They had to choose whether to stay in Singapore temporarily or stay in Johor Bahru and risk losing their jobs. With such short notice, 30-year-old Jensen Chow decided to pack his bags and leave his wife and 3 young children back home in JB. The assistant operations manager did not even have time to secure accommodation in Singapore.
At the time, we were very uncertain. I have no feelings to it. Me and my wife were also clueless. We do not know what to do. So what I have to do is I have to pack my bags, come into Singapore before Malaysia lockdown. I came into Singapore and with my luggage and hoping to find a place to stay. At that time, everyone who offers a place to stay increase their rental fee. And this is before the government support, the Singapore government support of the $50 a day. So, but I have a very nice friend. He generously offered his place, so I'm sleeping at his living room now.
Unfortunately, less than 3 weeks later, Jensen, along with other Malaysian colleagues, were asked to leave the company on April 5th. That's 2 days before Singapore's own restrictions of circuit breaker came into effect.
Everything got worse regarding the situation, the outbreak, and they actually hold the hiring process. They hold from people coming in, especially I'm on the work pass, S-pass to be precise. What my company has actually handled this situation is by letting some of the staff go on unpaid or taking their leave, because it's useless to have the manpower right now, you see. So it's not necessary to have so many people on the floor, especially in service in the restaurant. So most of the staff are actually on annual leave or unpaid leave or even on their off in lieu.
With so much at stake, all eyes are now on Prime Minister Muhyiddin Yassin to help steer the nation out of the crisis. When will the 2-month lockdown finally be lifted? If so, at what cost? Can the country's economy withstand this sudden shock to its system? And will it ever return to pre-pandemic economic levels? (2020), the year when Malaysia is supposed to achieve its vision of a developed nation status, as spelt out by former Prime Minister Dr. Mahathir Mohamad. And yet today, Southeast Asia's third largest economy is still struggling to achieve its target. Even before the global COVID-19 pandemic hit Malaysia this year, its economy has already been on a downward trend from the global economic slowdown and persistent trade tensions between the US and China. Its GDP grew only 4.3% last year compared to 4.7% the year before. The COVID-19 outbreak is just another unwelcome shock to its economy.
The COVID pandemic has created economic shockwaves throughout the world economy. So the Malaysian economy, which is very export-driven, will be hit by the external shocks of recessions in some of the world's largest economies. We do expect severe recessions in the US, in Europe, and also in Japan. So that will hurt Malaysian exports. So on top of this, there's also a very big negative shock from the lockdown that started in the middle of March.
That negative shock has already been felt on the ground, particularly by the business community. Overnight, small businesses like Custom Cake Bakery, Cake & Co. lost 100% of their income. Business partners Satira and Farah are now among those who are caught in a quandary, uncertain how or if they can get out of their predicament. They did not expect that things could become so bad within a short span of time.
The economy end of last year was we've already seen signs of it slowing down. It wasn't looking too good to begin with. The end of 2019, and it picked up a little bit for us during Chinese New Year. However, right after that, with the scares of COVID crisis all around the world, especially coming from China, things were slowing down a lot. And when the government of Malaysia announced that MCO was happening, in just I think a day notice, that was what was given to us. All our orders for March and April was cancelled overnight. So in terms of were we ready for that, I think we already saw a trend of the economy slowing down, But having all your orders cancelled overnight, that's not something we were prepared for. Yeah.
Some business projections require you to have at least 6 months, but no,
It doesn't work that way. It doesn't
really work that way for small businesses like us, where we solely depend on our sales every
Weekly
month.
sales, yeah.
Yeah.
On top of that, we have a team of 5 full-timers. You know, we employ full-time and we needed to pay salaries for, and we have a rent, and on top of that, you know, a whole bunch of other utilities and bills. So with an overnight notice and a drop on all the orders, I don't think anyone would be able to foresee that.
The Department of Statistics Malaysia recently revealed that consumer spending has halved during the movement control order compared to the period before the restrictions were in place. Most categories recorded steep decline with the exception of food and non-alcoholic beverages. Categories that saw the biggest fall were spending on clothing and shoes, transportation, as well as restaurants and hotels.
We had a very transparent chat with our team, like, look guys, there are no sales this week or this month or next month. We don't know how to pay you. So for now, you guys go back to your families, stay safe, be well until we figure out a solution. But as for now, we can only pay you up till the day that you're working, which is today. And you guys need to be patient with us until we find a way to come back from this. Luckily, we have a very understanding team and we're very close, like family, so they totally understand our point of view at that time. So yeah, it was a lot of pressure for employers to think you're not thinking about profit anymore. You're thinking about how do I
survive.
So far, Malaysia has set aside 260 billion ringgit or $60 billion in stimulus package. It's an attempt to put money into people's pockets in order to encourage spending at a time when many sectors are at a standstill. That includes $2.3 billion aimed at helping small and medium-sized enterprises to keep the businesses afloat.
It's around $60 billion. It's not a small amount, and it's around 18% of our GDP. In terms of actual fiscal impulse, though, it is a small proportion of the total stimulus package. There are options for individuals and businesses to take loan moratoriums for 6 months, so they wouldn't have to pay their interest on their loans for that amount of time, easing some financial burden on them. There's the option to withdraw from your pension fund for extra cash in hand. So all these measures that are non-governmental actually make up the crux of the stimulus programs. The part of the stimulus programs that we think have the most impact will be the actual direct income transfers and the easy or very fast cash in hand that people will have from these initiatives.
The Malaysian Institute of Economic Research has projected that 2.4 million jobs could disappear due to the COVID-19 outbreak. The majority of those affected would be unskilled labour. Household incomes are also projected to fall by 12%. As a result, consumer spending is expected to drop by 11%.
Malaysia has announced 3 separate stimulus measures which are going to have a huge positive impact on the economy. But basically it's a band-aid to offset the very large negative shocks to the economy. So even taking into account the massive stimulus measures, which could boost GDP by in the order of 4% of GDP, which is really a very huge stimulus, even allowing for that big stimulus, because the negative shock from the lockdown where economic activity basically has come to halt for a whole month, that negative shock is so great that even with all of the stimulus measures, we still expect that Malaysia will be in recession this year.
Such a severe economic contraction in the region has put much pressure on people like Jensen Chow. Jensen has worked in the F&B industry in Singapore for the last 13 years. After losing his job, he now has very few options left but to return to Johor Bahru, where he lives, to find a job to support his wife and their 3 children.
I need to find a job in Malaysia, or I need to set up my own business. Currently, I have actually a pet shop business in JB. So maybe I would continue doing that or helping out in delivery, just to sustain for the time being.
Business has also been tough for 24-year-old Muhammad Faris Tajul Azlan, whose sister had tested positive for COVID-19. He's now working for his family's property business and said it's been a double whammy for the family. After his sister came down with the disease, their income has also been badly hit by this crisis.
We have tenants, we have offices that we rent to tenants. So it has impacted us towards our income because since the MCO started, all the companies have to close their office, right? So for April, we do not have any income. So it has impacted our business, but we completely understand because we do not want anything. We are following the orders from the government as well, and we also think that the safety of our tenants are our priority also. But in terms of businesses, I would say it's quite bad.
It's no surprise that the self-employed or the micro businesses have been the most impacted by the closures of their businesses. You're not seeing any cash flow whatsoever during this time. So they've had to really struggle to get by, and they are the ones that are most at risk because they don't have enough cash reserves to actually pull them through even 2 weeks of no operations.
A sputtering economy, shrinking national wealth, eroding business confidence, and a growing public anxiety over the spread of COVID-19. Factors that have exerted tremendous pressure on Prime Minister Muhyiddin so soon after he assumed power. Can he overcome these challenges in the face of multiple threats? Will he emerge stronger or weaker after the crisis?
We are a nation at war with invisible forces. The situation we are now facing is unprecedented in history. And this government may not be the government that you voted for. But I want all of you to know that this government cares for you.
Mr. Muhyiddin Yassin became the Prime Minister on March 1st, 2020, at a time of great uncertainty. He has had to confront the threat of a deadly disease that's wreaking havoc across the country, cushion the impact of the public health crisis on its already struggling economy, ward off the attacks from an opposition force that's bent on challenging the legitimacy of the new coalition government, and keep the fragile new coalition intact in the face of increasing pressure from its more demanding ally, UMNO. As soon as the new cabinet was unveiled on March 9th, unhappiness began to emerge over the Prime Minister's cabinet picks. That's because the Muhyiddin-led party Bersatu has 30 MPs in the loose coalition. UMNO-led Perikatan Nasional, on the other hand, has 42. But UMNO was only given 9 ministerial positions despite being the largest party in the coalition, while Bersatu has 11. 2 of which are senior minister positions.
Because you have Bersatu, which is not the biggest party in the coalition, actually calling the shots. You have UMNO, the biggest party in the coalition, not really getting the lion's share of the cabinet, nor the most important position. And you have PAS, which I think would still be considered like a strange bedfellow for both Bersatu and UMNO. So you know, the balance is, it becomes very imbalanced at the end of the day.
One vocal critic was UMNO Supreme Council member and former Cabinet Minister Azalina Othman. Just 2 days after the new cabinet lineup was announced, she fired off a series of tweets suggesting that UMNO should be given more senior ministerial posts as well as important portfolios based on the principle of proportional representation.
A lot of people have understood what really transpired on the PN government was a coalition government. It's a shared government, and the government is about more of the member of parliament rather than the political party itself. If you can see, the numbers of position does not really correlate or enhance the proportional representation of the coalition partners.
If there's any unhappiness among its ranks, it would be something for the party's leadership to consider. It is a political reality that Bersatu's leader is the Prime Minister. So in any case, we have to ensure the success of the entire coalition, and because we are all in the same boat now. Therefore, it is important for all UMNO leaders at all levels, same as those in PN, to perform their best until our mandate is secured, until GE15.
But the political drumbeat of unhappiness kept going for some time, even as the nation was battling the worst public health crisis it has ever faced. Observers believe that in spite of the huge challenges facing the Prime Minister, the crisis has provided him with an opportunity to prove his leadership mettle. If he succeeds in resolving the current problems, he would emerge stronger as the leader who has led Malaysia out of a major health and economic crisis. The consensus so far seems to suggest that he has dealt with all these challenges well. He has proven himself to be a steady pair of hands in times of crisis.
I think generally Muhyiddin has brought stability in the way the Malaysian government has handled this. He was very straightforward, and he took on this COVID-19 issue immediately after he took over from power. He was quite hands-on. He made it a priority. If you notice in Malaysian media, almost every day we have a politician or administrator talking to the Malaysian public, which shows that the channel of communication between the government and the people was very good, very clear. And Muhyiddin has also made a very unpopular decision to restrict movement in the country. And if we look at the statistics in terms of Malaysians conforming to this order to restrict the movement, I think it's very high. So I think there's a trust in the way Tan Sri Muhyiddin has handled the crisis.
I think this new government is, in a way, the new coalition is in a way helped by the crisis, because it has, I think, stopped them from being too distracted them from infighting. So they have to focus on the crisis. Specifically in dealing with the crisis, I think the Malaysian government has done relatively better than some countries. The movement restrictions order were put in place relatively quickly. Malaysia also has very flexible security forces. The military could be deployed fairly quickly to impose the restrictions. This is something unheard of in many Western countries.
I think they've done a fairly good job in Malaysia, given the circumstances. I think the lockdown was quite necessary for political reasons too, I suppose, because those who are against the PN taking over, they would say that it would be good that there's no movement, because there will be less horse trading going on, be fewer political movements, which people are not really very happy about. So the lockdown, I think, serves as a kind of, you could say, a circuit breaker, in the Singapore sense, that it actually kind of disrupts certain activities.
On Twitter, the hashtag #NotMyPM was trending during Mr. Muhyiddin's first week on the job. But now, 2 months later, the 8th Malaysian Prime Minister appears to be winning over a sceptical public with his handling of the crisis. A far more positive hashtag has been gaining traction, MyPM8. Malaysia has also received praise from the World Health Organization, or WHO, for its preparedness and ability in containing the COVID-19 outbreak.
In his speeches for the past few weeks, and we noticed that the Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin has proven his critics wrong, and many were pleased with his performance so far. And it's not a rookie. The government is thrust into a situation with many economic challenges, made even tougher by the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have to balance the economic impact with our goals to bring health and safety levels back to normal.
On the economic front, the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, has projected that Malaysia's real GDP will grow at a rate of 9% next year, the fastest among ASEAN 5 countries. But the economic rebound in 2021 rests on the assumption that the pandemic would fade in the second half of 2020.
I think given what we're seeing with the cases now being contained, so I'm hopeful that the third and fourth quarter of this year we'll see quite a good recovery in Malaysian domestic demand in terms of consumer spending and also government spending on infrastructure. There's been quite a big stimulus announced. So all of those things should start to boost economic activity already in the second half of this year. One of the big unknowns is the financial stress that's going to be impacting on businesses. Many small to medium enterprises will be facing a lot of financial stress at the moment because they have no revenue when everything is closed. So that is one big concern, that companies may not be able to survive protracted lockdown.
The COVID-19 pandemic may have come as a shock to both Farah and Satira. In spite of their losses, they're willing to bite the bullet and soldier on.
I've passed the being upset about everything stage, and I'm actually very positive because this is going to be a new challenge. It's going to be a new economic landscape. You're going to have new breeds of very creative entrepreneurs trying to find things to sell or trying to create services that are catered to everyone in self-isolation.
Malaysia has seen how devastating the COVID-19 outbreak has been, both to public health and the economy. But efforts to stop the rapid spread of the virus seem to be showing positive results. Bigger challenges, however, await Perikatan Nasional's government once the crisis is over.
There's a question of legitimacy, there's a question of capacity, there's a question of even, whether they have a united plan and vision together to see the country forward, let alone, trying to compete in the next election just to get the country up and going again. That is a test.
I think given his experience, he's seen as the right man to take the job of the Prime Minister. I think he has handled the situation very well. He has ensured that people conform to the restriction orders issued by the government. But the bigger question is whether after this whole pandemic is over, whether people will come back and discuss political succession. But this is certainly an opportunity for Tan Sri Muhyiddin to show his leadership qualities. And I think, to be fair to him, I think he has done quite a decent job in handling the COVID-19 situation.
I hope that Malaysians will stay strong, we will be united, will be stronger in facing COVID-19, and which is the biggest enemy to all Malaysians as well as to the entire world. So, in short, we are united to fight this war, and we must win.